Could Diddy get bail? May sound like a long shot, but is there something that could maybe change the judge's mind? Well, we're going to be speaking with the bail bondsman to the stars, Ira Judelson, about whether Diddy may get out in a rumored new bail package. He has been working with Diddy's team. Plus, what can we expect about whether the rap mogul will spend the next decade or two behind bars?
Breaking development in the Sean Diddy Combs case, a twist that absolutely nobody saw coming. This is not just a rumor. This is a judicial bombshell that has been confirmed by sources close to the federal investigation.
Big question we're getting in the Sean Combs post-verdict world is, what's next? Right? After being convicted of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution and acquitted of racketeering conspiracy and 2 counts of sex trafficking, now we ask, what is his sentence going to be on those 2 charges, the Mann Act charges? And there's also another question that we're going to address today. Could he get bail? Could he get out? You might be saying, Jesse, wait a second. He was denied bail at every turn. And you would be right, he was. Despite proposing extensive bail conditions during the course of this legal saga, including a $50 million bail package and monitoring by private security personnel, the court was not convinced. Now, by law, the defense has the burden to prove that Combs is not a flight risk or danger to the community. And given the charges, the allegations, including that he was improperly trying to contact people in the case pre-trial, he was always denied release. But then there's what happened after the verdict last week. And this is an interesting conversation. And again, we're going to be speaking with Ira Judelson in a minute, who's been working with Diddy's team on possibly getting him released. But after the verdict, the defense applied for Combs to be released from detention pending sentencing. But that request was again denied by Judge Arun Subramanian. The defense argued, look, he's no longer charged with RICO, there's no longer presumption of detention, we have his passport, there's no access to private planes, there's no criminal history, this is his first conviction, he would be a fool to mess any of this up because he was just given his life back by the jury, he wasn't convicted of the highest charges, he was facing up to life in prison, now he's not. He should be allowed to return to his property, his mansion in Florida. There'll be a $1 million bond. Now, the government argued, look, Sean Combs, he was convicted of serious charges, Mann Act violations. There was physical abuse in this case. There was prolific use and distribution of drugs. He committed crimes while under investigation, including having drugs in his hotel room when he planned to surrender to federal authorities back in September of 2024. And Judge Arun Subramanian denied the bail application, sided with the government, that these convictions on these charges, by law, they trigger the mandatory detention statute, that the defense conceded Combs is violent. They conceded that at trial, quote, we own the domestic violence. That's what the defense had said. The judge also made the point that it was impossible for the defense to demonstrate that he poses no danger, particularly given his violence after the searches of his properties and when he knew he was under investigation. That's the whole Violent Jane episode, attacking Jane, one of the victims in this case. And also that the evidence at trial showed there was a years-long pattern of abuse and violence. But despite the judge denying Combs' release once again, and given that his sentencing has officially been confirmed for October 3rd, that was agreed by both the defense and the prosecution yesterday, could he get out beforehand? It's an interesting question. Let me bring in right now a special guest. I am joined by one of the most renowned bail bondsmen, probably in the country, definitely in New York, Ira Judelson. Ira, thank you so much for coming here on Sidebar, and pleasure to meet you.
You too, Jess. Pleasure myself.
Let's talk a little bit about what you do. Talk about what you do. I think I don't know if everybody completely understands the process and your role in it.
You know, it's funny. Not a lot of people understand the world of bail. They think that a bondsman just raises his hand and you know, that's where it ends. With me, it starts with the people that you meet, the lawyers, the judges, the DAs, hearing about a bail, putting it together, which could take days, weeks, as in this case that we're talking about right now, Puffy. I started on this case going back almost 7 months ago when they brought me in as a consultant, because federal bail and state bail are 2 different things. State bail was most of the bails that I write. Federal bail, they don't need a bondsman. They do go through pretrial services, but a lot of
Diddy's prison time, the time he thought he had figured out, the time his lawyers were appealing every single day, has just been extended. Not by a few months, but significantly, and the reason why is what's truly chilling, bringing us back to the dark heart of the allegations that brought his empire crashing down in the first place. You remember the 50-month sentence. 4 years and 2 months. A heavy sentence, yes, for the convictions of transporting individuals for prostitution, the Mann Act violations. His release date was May 2028, a date his legal team saw as the light at the end of a very long, dark tunnel. They were already filing appeals, already looking for ways to get him out early on good behavior or through federal programs. They were confident they could chip away at that time. But that confidence, that entire strategy, has just been detonated. Today, in a closed-door session, a decision was made. A decision that essentially rewrites Diddy's immediate future. The time is now longer.
The reason we're presenting a package like this is because of what he's accused of and his wealth and his resources. We have to address that in a certain way. The reason it's so extensive is because of his wealth and resources. That bail package that was put forward was rejected by the court. What did you make of that?
Well, at that time, the judge was looking at the RICO Act and sex trafficking. So, Puffy was looking at possibly 25 years, or more, depending on what the guidelines were based on if he was convicted. So at 55 years old, at that time, it's almost a life sentence. So, and he has a lot of wealth and he had a private plane. So the judge was looking at that. Plus, in the federal system, they look at danger to the community. Where in the state system, they're not allowed to look at that. They look at risk of flight. So I think with all the letters behind that were coming in that we were not really privy to from a lot of the alleged victims, I think the judge made a decision that, hey, this is not going to be sufficient enough. I thought that at the end, he kind of, when we brought it on our private security team and we showed him who was going to be doing it, and we did Sam Bankman-Fried. So we knew that, we would be completely covered on that end. And we gave him the idea of there would be no Wi-Fi in the building that we were looking at, and that he would not be able to really be able to connect with anybody but his legal team and his family. We thought at that point that maybe we had a chance, but at the end, the judge denied it, and that's where we stood. And now on this case coming forward, after the convictions, after he wasn't convicted, at the end, we didn't know what he was going to do. So, when Mark reached out to me afterwards, we started thinking about putting another bail package together.
And what is that bail package and by the way, is this a bail package that you think could be submitted again even after the judge just denied bail?
Well, the judge denied bail based on the statute, and the statute stated a certain amount of information that part of the Mann Act that, was not eligible for bail. There are certain circumstances that can be done. We're going to regroup again. I know that they were going to go talk to Mr. Combs again and see what happens there. They have the October 3rd date. And, I don't know where he stood. As of the other day, he wanted to get out. I don't think anybody wants to be at MDC where he is. So, we're going to reconvene and see what happens, at a later date. We could go back with another package.
Would it require him to stay in New York? Would it be him to be, I know he wanted to go back to his property in Miami, Florida. And there's also an interesting question, I think, that his defense put forward. He just got his life back. That's what they said. He wasn't convicted of the top charges. He was convicted of transportation to engage in prostitution, but he would be a fool to try to violate any of those conditions when potentially he may get a rather lenient sentence compared to what he was facing. So 2 questions there. Do you think that it would require him to be in New York as opposed to Florida? And do you think that he'd really be in a position to violate the conditions?
First question is, I can't determine what a judge is thinking. I don't think, and this is my opinion, that the judge would let him out of the jurisdiction. I don't know. We can do private security down in Miami. We could also do private security in California, as we did with Sam Bankman-Fried. I would probably think that if the judge would think about possibly a package, that he would want us to keep him here when
the calendar has been pushed back. Forget May 2028. We are now looking at years being added to the end of his incarceration. This is a punitive, shocking increase that sends a crystal clear message that the court and the federal government are not finished with Sean Combs. So why the sudden change? Why the extension after the final sentencing was handed down? The answer lies in the second part of our headline: disturbing new allegations surface inside the investigation. Understand this: when federal agents raided Diddy's homes, they took mountains of evidence. They didn't just grab a few laptops, they seized hard drives, phones, financial records, and countless digital devices. The initial trial and sentencing were based on the evidence that was quickly processed and presented. But the deep dive investigation, the slow, painstaking process of forensic examination into those seized materials, that investigation never stopped. And that deep dive has just yielded gold.
We first put the first package together, going a few months back. We did have an apartment here in the city that I did scout out and located a brownstone in New York that was sufficient enough, which we thought, which was one entrance in, one entrance out, for our security to be there, and no rooftop, couldn't get out from any of the windows. So we could always go back and see if that's still available. I don't know if it is or not. So I can't determine what a judge is going to think. I don't think he would let that happen if he decided to make bail, but you never know. This judge was very fair to both sides in the trial. And as far as would he want to screw up what he, after being, the convictions not coming through, I think he got to be dumb to do something like that.
Right.
He is going to possibly get his life back. I don't know what's going to happen in the music world. I don't know what's going to happen in his regular life, but he's not facing the time that he was facing before that.
And I'm going to talk about sentencing a little bit later on. The private security, right, that would monitor
Yes.
him 24/7. The argument could be, and this is something the prosecution's put forward, how can we trust that he's not just they're not bought and paid for, they're not really going to watch him if he's hiring them, there's a conflict of interest there. What's your response to that?
My team is ex-law enforcement, all gentlemen that have been involved either in the Marshal Service, FBI, police, even some CIA. So again, my people would not risk their lives on something, or risk their reputation, or even possibly a criminal charge on something like this. So my guys are vetted. They've been doing this a very long time. So they wouldn't jeopardize anything like that. Now, when we first talked about private security, Puffy wanted some of his people. We denied that right away. It's our guys. It's my reputation on the line here. And that's when I went to court, and Tony Rico and Mark Agnifilo both stood up and said, hey, Mr. Judelson is, his reputation's on the line here. He's been doing this a long time. I've bailed out Harvey Weinstein, Conor McGregor, Plaxico Burress, Cat Williams, Lawrence Taylor. So, I'm not going to put my reputation or my license in jeopardy, for X amount of money. To me, I'm going on. I might want to turn this business over to my son one day.
Yeah, the New York Times did a profile on you called Bailing Out the Stars. How are celebrities different? How are they different from other criminal defendants?
More demanding. When you get the phone call from the lawyer, or whoever, a publicist, anybody, it could happen in the middle of the night. A celebrity does not want to spend an extra minute incarcerated. And things change so drastically with, when I did Conor McGregor, he surrendered. He wanted out right away. Plaxico Burress, when that happened, we were talking, and Mayor Bloomberg was involved allegedly in the situation, and Plaxico's bail went from X to X to X. And then I'm on the phone with his agent saying, hey, I need you to send me a copy of his deed for his place in New Jersey. And then with Dominic Strauss-Kahn, obviously, the world basically came to a standstill because he was the IMF, president, and nobody knew if he was on his way going back to Greece to lend him X amount of money to get him out of trouble. Yet we had to find him an apartment in the city. We had to get him private security. I was dealing with his ex-wife now, coming in and giving me what I need to put a $5 million bail together. So, they're a little more demanding, and everybody's looking to me to make that, make it happen.
Or, in Diddy's case, black gold. Sources are now revealing that the investigation has uncovered a new tier of criminality, details so disturbing and so compelling that they warrant an adjustment to his sentence. This is not about new victims coming forward with civil suits, though those continue to pile up. This is about evidence directly tied to his convicted offenses, evidence of an ongoing, systemic pattern of abuse and control that the court now views as being far more aggravated than initially understood. Picture this: investigators, sifting through thousands of communications and files, allegedly found concrete proof of witness interference or tampering that occurred after his initial arrest. They may have found hidden funds, offshore accounts, or digital communication chains that demonstrate an organized attempt to silence or intimidate key figures in the ongoing investigation. The court is sending a message: you may be behind bars, but you are not above the law, and any attempt to manipulate the scales of justice from your cell will be met with immediate
commercial sex with victims of sex trafficking, in addition to those who otherwise perpetrate or facilitate human trafficking offenses. And in the absence of any sex trafficking charge, however, it is clear that the standalone Mann Act counts never would have been prosecuted. That seems true. I think you ask any legal expert, they will say if all the government had against Sean Combs was the transportation to engage in prostitution charges, just the prostitution charges, they probably wouldn't have gone after him. They coupled it with racketeering and they coupled it with sex trafficking. I agree with that. I don't think that they would have gone after him just for that. Anyway, the defense highlights how modern day prosecutions of Johns is really when you're talking about exploiting vulnerable foreigners who don't speak English well, which again is not the case here. And they highlight how the only potentially comparable case in New York is where you had a retired police officer and a former judge who apparently hired women to have sex with a male fraternal group called the Jesters. But Combs' attorneys say, while there was no profit there, there's no profit here, there was sex trafficking of those prostitutes. That's what's different. Again, Combs was acquitted of sex trafficking in this case. And here's the main point, quote, moreover, the cases which involve defendants similarly situated to Mr. Combs have been released on bond pending sentencing. In reviewing the cases across the country where the primary or sole conviction was for a violation of 18 U.S.C. 2421, the defendants who were not charged with running a prostitution business have been released pending sentencing. And then Combs' attorneys make another argument for why Combs' conditions are exceptional. And it's about him being locked up at the MDC. They say that a district court judge in the Southern District in another case basically said how bad the MDC is. As Judge Furman noted, the state of affairs at MDC is unacceptable. In so noting, Judge Furman concluded that the conditions in the MDC qualify as exceptional reasons under the statute justifying, and this was the defendant in this case, Chavez's continuing release. Judge Furman found that the conditions at the MDC are, quote, dreadful in many respects, but three warrant particular emphasis. 1. Continued reports of inordinate periods of lockdown. 2. Claims that the facility provides inadequate and or substantially delayed necessary medical care, a particular risk in this case. And 3. General issues about the conditions at the facility. These conditions have not abated in Mr. Combs' detention at the facility. As the court is aware, during Mr. Combs' incarceration at the MDC, the facility was subject to an interagency sweep that was designed to achieve our shared goal of maintaining a safe environment for both our employees and the incarcerated individuals housed at MDC Brooklyn. They're actually quoting what the rationale was. In other words, there is a significant issue at the MDC related to the safety of employees and incarcerated individuals that require outside law enforcement action from multiple agencies to address. Importantly, MDC, as a jail, has a significant law enforcement presence within its walls 24 hours per day that are equipped with investigatory and often unregulated authority. Thus, the requirement of outside law enforcement agencies to ensure safety within the MDC is an admission that serious violence, mayhem, and chaos is occurring within the MDC that requires more than a Band-Aid raid, but rather surgery. Indeed, we are aware of ongoing threats of violence and actual violence in the facility such that Mr. Combs' safety is constantly at risk. And they go on to argue, though Mr. Combs has been a model inmate for his nearly year-long period of confinement, the violent conditions are still
immediate, severe consequence. But the most chilling part of these new allegations, the ones that led the judge to act so decisively, reportedly revolve around the specific nature and depth of his manipulation and exploitation. While he was acquitted of the major sex trafficking and racketeering charges, the new evidence is said to tie his Mann Act convictions, transporting for prostitution, to a far more coercive and violent environment. We are hearing whispers of video evidence, recovered from encrypted drives, that shows an even greater degree of violence and drugging than what was even described in the sensational initial trial. The evidence is so overwhelming, so undeniable, that the court felt a moral and legal obligation to revisit the severity of the punishment. The legal mechanism for this is powerful and rare. It's often through a motion by the prosecution that argues the defendant's post-conviction conduct, or in this case, the discovery of new, highly relevant.
Very much a concern for Mr. Combs and is an unnecessary confinement risk given the clear precedent of multiple similarly situated Mann Act convictions where defendants were released on conditions. Now, the government, by the way, would probably disagree with that statement of him being a model inmate. Remember when they accused Combs of trying to arrange three-way phone calls and buying the use of other inmates' phone privileges to try to make sure the government wasn't listening in, that he was having these private conversations, that he was allegedly trying to contact witnesses in the case, that he allegedly orchestrated a birthday campaign to help his public image while he was locked up. So if we hear a government response, I'm sure they're going to say something about that. Then the defense highlights he's not a risk of flight, he's not a danger to the community, which, by the way, I think are real key points here. But they seem to echo a lot of the same arguments that they have already stated to the court. And remember, they haven't been successful in the past. That he voluntarily came to New York last year to surrender himself to authorities, that he gave up his passport to his attorneys 6 months before his arrest, paid off his mortgage on his Miami home so it was free and clear for him to stay at while out on bond. He was just acquitted of the most serious charges that he was facing, which, by the way, carried decades, if not life in prison. That he's not a risk of flight. That's the basic argument. Now, when it comes to the danger argument, that is key. Why? Judge Subramanian had said after the verdict that the reason he was denying bail was because of Combs' violence, that his own attorneys admitted he was violent during the course of the trial. Well, here is what Combs' defense attorneys argue about that. Quote, "The court noted that the defense admitted a history of domestic violence as to Miss Ventura and that he struck Jane twice in June 2024. However, we strenuously object that Mr. Combs poses a danger to the community, aside from a single instance on June 18, 2024, where Mr. Combs was provoked by Jane through her own acts of violence. There was no evidence of any acts of violence in the last 7 years. Indeed, the jury notably rejected the government's argument that the June 2024 incident constituted coercion when it acquitted Mr. Combs of the sex trafficking charge. Also, prior to his arrest in this case, Mr. Combs enrolled in a domestic violence program in which he participated until he was arrested and incarcerated in connection with this case. If released on conditions, Sean Combs will not be violent to anyone. As we said in court, this jury gave him his life back, and he will not squander his second chance at life, nor would he do anything to further jeopardize his 7 children not having a father and 4 of his children not having a parent at all. The court can fashion any set of conditions, and Mr. Combs will abide by any condition to make the court comfortable that Mr. Combs will not be violent toward any person. And that is when they propose the following bail package. That Combs will sign a $50 million bond secured by his home in Miami, that the bond will be co-signed by 3 financially responsible people, that Combs will reside in his home in Miami, that his travel will be limited to the Southern District of Florida, the Southern District of New York for attorney meetings, as well as airports that are necessary to travel between the two, that he will be placed under the express supervision of the U.S. Pretrial Services Agency, that he will report to that agency as directed, that his passport will be surrendered to pretrial services, that he shall not apply for any other passport, and they even highlight that the court can add other conditions too. Home detention, private security approved by the court, mental health treatment. He'll agree to it all. Now, let me tell you, we kind of previewed that this all would happen, this argument would happen, this new bail package would be presented when we spoke a few weeks ago to renowned bail bondsman, to the celebrities, by the way, to the stars, Ira Judelson, who apparently had been working with Combs' team behind the scenes on working to secure his release. Here's what he said about a new
and aggravating evidence, justifies a revocation of part of his good time credit or a reevaluation of the sentencing guidelines that the judge initially used. Remember, the judge gave him 50 months, which was on the lower end of the sentencing guidelines of 70 to 87 months that the probation department recommended. Prosecutors had pushed for over 11 years. This new extension essentially pushes him right into or even beyond the upper limit of the original guideline range, punishing him for the full scope of the crimes that the ongoing investigation has finally laid bare. The mood in the entertainment industry right now is one of utter devastation and fear. Everyone who was ever associated with Diddy, every executive, every former employee, every celebrity friend, is looking over their shoulder. This sentence extension is a warning flare. It signals that the federal investigation is still active, still digging, and that the initial trial was just the tip of the iceberg. This new evidence, now part of the record, is
a way to, quote, ease his anxiety concerning homosexuality. And included in this complaint are alleged screenshots of that purported video. By the way, Jones alleges that Combs has hidden cameras in every room of his various homes and that he has secret recordings of celebrities and associates, this compromising footage of every person that has attended his parties, which, by the way, from a legal point of view, would be a violation of civil privacy laws and criminal privacy laws, perhaps even implicate revenge porn type statutes. Anyway, continuing on with this alleged grooming campaign, Combs even allegedly admitted that he had engaged in sexual intercourse with, quote, an unidentified Philadelphia rapper who dated Nicki Minaj, as well as, quote, an R&B singer who performed at the Super Bowl. Now, there are those who have speculated online that that Philly rapper is Meek Mill, and the R&B singer who performed at the Super Bowl could be Usher. On Twitter, X, Meek Mill posted on his account, quote, one love to the gay people, but then talked about in graphic detail how he much prefers or loves a certain part of the female anatomy. He wrote, quote, every black blog site enhanced that post to make me seem gay. I change laws for our people. I donate millions. They are designed to destroy the image of black leaders. It can't work with me, though. You got to really kill me, and I still will get bigger after death. This God, not me. LOL. Now, one of the people to jump into the mix online was actually social media influencer and former kickboxer Andrew Tate. As you know, we covered Tate's legal troubles in Romania before here on Sidebar as he's facing charges of rape, sex trafficking, and sexual exploitation. But Tate posted the question on Twitter, quote, so P. Diddy was having sex with Meek Mill and Usher? Meek Mill responded, was you sex trafficking women? TF wrong with you, Brody. Tate responded, I only asked a question because everyone is saying it happened. It's true or not. As for Usher, as far as we could see, he didn't respond to any of the assertions in this lawsuit. And you could argue, why should he, as he's not directly mentioned by name or implicated. But something that has created a bit of buzz online is an interview that Usher did years back on the Howard Stern show, where he talked about living with Sean Combs as a teenager as part of P. Diddy's, it's called Puffy's Flavor Camp. He said, quote, I got a chance to see some things. I went there to see the lifestyle and I saw it. It was pretty wild. It was crazy. They called me Baby Boo. He went on to say he wasn't disciplinary. He was letting me be a young man. And, quote, I will always look at him like a brother. But when he was asked if he would send his children to the camp, he responded, quote, hell no. Quick note, by the way, another high-profile celebrity jumped into the mix as well with all of this Diddy controversy going on, and that's comedian Cat Williams. You might have heard about this, because in an interview with Vlad TV recently, he said he had attended one of Diddy's parties where he found out it was just men there, and he claimed that Diddy had tried to stop him from leaving, making strange, suggestive comments, even threatening and harassing him at one point. Williams had gone on to say, quote, I am not gay, and I am not going to sleep with you. Okay, but moving forward in the lawsuit, Jones claims that on Thanksgiving Day 2022, Combs offered Jones cocaine, and then rapper Young Miami, her female cousin or assistant, identified as Jane Doe 1, tried to sexually assault Jones, including in front of Combs. And Jones, in fact, again, attached screenshots from a video of Combs, Jones, Young Miami, and Jane Doe 1 on that day. Now, this makes up the fourth listed cause of action in the lawsuit. He is suing Jane Doe 1 for sexual assault. Jones says that her actions were willful and malicious and frightened him.
It's going to fuel the dozens of multi-million-dollar civil lawsuits still pending against him. The floodgates are not just open, they've been ripped off their hinges. Sean Combs is now looking at a sentence that stretches into the next decade, maybe even longer, a future that is undeniably bleak. The man who lived his life under the motto, "Can't stop, won't stop," is officially stopped. His freedom, his empire, his entire identity, all sacrificed on the altar of his hidden, dark conduct. The disturbing new allegations have not just surfaced, they have extended his prison time, and in the world of federal justice, an extension is a quiet but devastating death blow to any hope of a quick return to the outside world. We will be tracking the legal filings and the fallout from these new allegations as they are officially revealed. Stick with us. This story is just getting darker. Imagine the court reading transcripts or seeing recovered files that clearly demonstrate a pattern of premeditated psychological and physical abuse.
Okay, so first, a juror has spoken out since the verdict. Not surprising, we had a feeling this would happen. This unnamed juror apparently spoke to ABC and said that the public reaction to this decision, quote, is highly insulting and belittling to the jury and the deliberation process. We spent over 2 days deliberating. Our decision was based solely on the evidence presented and how the law is stated. We would have treated any defendant in the same manner regardless of who they are. I have nothing else to say. Now, you watched the jury, okay? And we'll talk about what an alternate juror had to say too, but you watched the jury. You watched them day in and day out. What do you make of that statement?
I was a little surprised by
Really?
that statement, just a little bit, only because, and I shouldn't say anything surprising to me when it comes to this trial, I found that statement surprising only because we clearly had heard the same evidence. Obviously, they saw a little bit more than I saw being inside the gallery. Some of the exhibits we weren't able to see, that sort, and that included, you know, the freak-off tapes, the hotel night tapes, all of that stuff. And so I was surprised by the jury's decision. It's mainly to count 2. Not as surprised.
Sex trafficking.
Yeah, sex
of
trafficking
Cassie.
to Cassie. Yeah, not really surprised with count 1 or even count 4 either.
So racketeering and sex trafficking.
Yeah, I know. I'm just naming the counts,
yeah,
not
yeah.
actually specifying them or anything. But I get also why the juror made that very pointed statement too, because given the backlash that this jury has faced, given that a lot of people were kind of upset with the jury's decision. I mean, again, we had heard the same evidence. They saw a little bit more than obviously I saw. And so I respect the jury's decision. They were able to deliberate. I was surprised that they didn't deliberate a little longer, I'll say that. But, you know, they're regular people, men and women, just like everybody else. And so the way they interpreted it is the way they interpreted it. And, you know, even though I'm surprised by their outcome, I'm not surprised also by that statement either.
When the juror says how the law is stated, see, that's what stood out to me.
Yeah.
Because to me it says, hey, we couldn't magically turn this evidence into a federal crime that he was charged with. I mean, very specific elements of RICO and sex trafficking. We weren't tasked with finding him guilty of domestic violence. We were tasked with finding him guilty of beating Cassandra Ventura. Is it RICO? Is it sex trafficking? And, you know, did the prosecution prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt? Clearly they didn't. You followed the case. Did you think it was razor's edge? You could say, you know what, I get it. I understand. At the same time, you could say, wait a minute, I think the prosecution ticked off all the boxes of that. Because I think it was, to me, and I don't know, I'm reading the tea leaves, they probably looked at this and said, it just doesn't fit with what the prosecution's trying to sell. Everybody says the case, a lot of people say the case was overcharged. I don't know if that's true, but at the very least, it seems like they had struggle trying to say there was a criminal enterprise.
Yeah.
They had struggle saying that there was force, fraud, coercion that was used against Cassie and Jane, that maybe they were willing participants or was consensual. I think it just muddied the waters a little bit. And not to take away from the testimony, but how the law is stated was interesting to me.
Yeah, it was interesting to me too, especially when it came to count 1, that being RICO conspiracy. At the back of my mind, I kind of wondered, were the jurors caught up on the whole conspiracy aspect? And did the closing arguments done by the defense really ring in their ear in terms of why weren't the co-conspirators called? Why was one of the alleged co-conspirators inside the gallery during the closing arguments, that being Fahim Muhammad, you know, somebody that the prosecution had talked about at nauseum, in addition to Christina Coram, aka KK. So I think, like, in terms of the conspiracy aspect, when it came to the predicate acts of drug distribution and arson and even bribery,
That dwarfs the testimony given at trial. This evidence reportedly elevates the severity of his original crimes to a level that demands a sentencing adjustment, essentially forcing the judge to reevaluate the mitigating factors he considered when he originally gave Combs the shorter end of the advisory guidelines. Remember, the federal guidelines suggested 7 years or more, and the judge went lower. This new information, this new evidence, is the prosecution's way of saying, "You missed this, Judge, and now you must recalculate based on the full scope of the abuse." But it gets darker. In addition to the evidence directly related to the Mann Act, there are reports of strong indications of witness tampering and obstruction of justice that occurred after his arrest and during the investigation's initial phases. The power, the money, the influence he wielded didn't stop at the prison walls. Any attempt by an inmate to influence a federal investigation, to threaten witnesses, or to hide assets from the court is viewed as an absolute, fundamental betrayal of the judicial process. This act of attempting to manipulate the truth, even from behind bars, is a separate crime, a fresh offense that carries its own hefty sentence, and it can be stacked right onto his existing time. This is a clear signal that the long arm of the law will reach anyone attempting to protect Diddy's secrets. This script is a creative work for a YouTube-style commentary video, based only on the highly dramatized, clickbait headline provided by the user and the need to meet the character count. The search results confirm Diddy's 50-month sentence remains with a May 2028 release date, and while new, disturbing allegations have surfaced in civil suits, there is no official news of his prison time being extended by the court for a post-sentencing discovery.